Welcome to episode 3 of my SG guitar kit build. In this episode, I'll be adjusting the neck angle and marking the neck to the appropriate scale length. In the last 2 episodes, I unboxed the kit that I bought off eBay, and then did a dry fit and a deep dive on the measurements versus a Gibson SG. In the second episode, I discovered that the neck angle of the kit was too extreme and leaned too far back. So let's start this episode with neck angle adjustments. When perfect, a straight edge placed on the guitar neck should rest right on top of the bridge when it's in its lowest position. As I discovered in the previous episode, the straight edge didn't reach the bridge and was resting too high. If I left the neck as is, the strings would rub against the fretboard as shown in the bottom image here. If the bridge couldn't be raised high enough to avoid this, the guitar would be unplayable. If I had a belt sander, I would have held the bottom part of the neck that made contact with the guitar against the sandpaper, putting increasing pressure on the bottom end of the neck to change the angle. But I don't have a belt sander, so I created this jig. It's a piece of hobby board that I confirmed was flat with a speed square. I used a glue stick to apply a piece of 150 grit sandpaper to the board and allowed it to dry. Adjusting the neck angle was a tedious process because I didn't want to take off too much material accidentally, so I went between sanding and testing the neck angle often. I clamped the sanding jig to the table and pushed the neck back and forth against the sandpaper, applying more pressure on the bottom end of the neck to create the angle. I was sure to apply even pressure so I didn't take more material off one side of the neck or the other. I clamped the neck back to the guitar to check the angle until the straight edge rested perfectly on the bridge. Now let's move on to marking the scale length. The scale length on a guitar is the distance between the nut and the bridge adjusted to its shortest position. If you watched episode 2, you watched me bellyache about the scale length not appearing to be 24 3/4 inches on this kit. After researching more, Gibson has not been consistent throughout history for the actual scale length of their 24 3/4 inch scale guitars. Given that the length from nut to 12th fret is 12 5/16 inches, the scale length on this kit would actually be 24 5/8, double the nut to the 12th fret length. When properly placing the bridge, the high E string side of the bridge is typically set a bit shorter than the scale length, so I'll be measuring out to 24 9/16 inches on the high E from nut to bridge in its most forward position. Measuring the scale length was a mix of getting the distance from the nut to the bridge correct, as well as getting the neck angle from side to side right. Since this is a glue-in neck, I'm only going to get one chance to do this right. So first, I clamped the neck in and installed the high E and low E strings to visually inspect that they were running straight down the neck. Then, I checked the scale length against the high E string. It was a little short, so you can see me here adjusting the neck out a bit to increase the length. I checked again and adjusted until it measured exactly 24 9/16 inches. Next, I used straight pieces of hobby board again to check that the sides of the neck line up with the bridge at the same place on each side. This would be a lot easier if I had wider clamps, but I don't, so I have to take the clamps on and off to measure each side. Once they are the same, the strings still look visually straight, so I recheck the scale length, then mark where the neck hits the guitar body with a pencil. Later, I decide that I want to also install the 2 center strings, D and G, to make sure that they are centered on the neck's center dot inlays. This should indicate that the neck is straight. This results in me shifting the neck a little towards the low E string. This gives a little bit more space before the strings fall off on the high E side, but the high and low E strings still appear to be straight down the neck. This adjustment means the board centering method no longer lines up, even though it's the suggested method in kit manuals. However, after checking other electric guitars, this seems common. I mark the neck again where it hits the guitar body with a pencil, so I can line up again later. Before I glue in the neck, I want to do all of the body and neck reshaping, because it'll be easier with separate pieces. So stay tuned for the next episode where I'll be shaping the headstock.